okay? Because in the lower grades, I mean, they were giving, phonetics related tests, Dibbles test, that they were having to give like every 2 weeks. So we were having to hire substitutes to fill in so the teachers could be on a team testing these kids for the Dibbles. And on the upper grades, we had the quarterly exams, and also the Dibbles was bumped up into the upper grade. So it was going like from kindergarten all the way through 6th grade. So we had the quarterly test, we had the Dibbles, okay? And then we had the park, which came onto the scene. So more and more testing was being dumped on me as the counselor. I was called the site test coordinator. Real fancy, highfalutin name for test pusher, basically is what it was. And I did not like that because my contacts with the students probably decreased by probably over 60% of the time that these kids needed help. And my last year, I was really sad because right when we were starting with the NMELPA test, the Mexico English Language Proficiency test, and I was over that, getting all the grade levels set up and getting the kids set up in large groups so I could test them. Yes?
So do you think like the more distance you got from your students was because you were pushing on them for the test and learning more about like...
Can you repeat that, please?
So when you said that your 60% increase of like getting away from like their emotional aspect and more pushing the test, is because you were just pushing the test on them?
Oh yeah, I was setting up one test after another. At one point I was over like around 10 state secured online tests. And as a test coordinator, I would go in, put all the kids' names in, their demographic information, okay, student ID numbers and so on and so forth. Then I would set up the class list, for each teacher and all of their tests. Then when we came into the testing window, I was printing all of the test tickets for the students with their username passwords on the test. And I mean, it was stacks. I just had stacks and stacks of paper all over my office.
So you were no longer the counselor then?
No. I felt like I was robbed of my job. And it grieved me in my spirit, in my heart, it grieved me. Because I thought, hey, I'm not even doing what I was trained to do. I was over all of these tests. And, and it was sad because a lot of times with the quarterly test, the Dibbles test, park test, there was so many testing intervals going on throughout the year that these teachers wouldn't even get to instruct on that concept before it was tested on a quarterly test or a Dibbles test. But I can go on and name test after test after test, that we did. The park, I had to learn about the Lernia test, and it was a big joke that we called it the hernia test because it was a pain setting it all up. It was awful. But anyway, yes.
After a while you setting up all these tests, did you actually try to contact the many people from that are giving you the test and say, hey, we want a little bit more time to instruct or do something about it?
And I was kind of a little peon, so I really didn't have the authority to question that. And I know Obama in his last term did sign a bill to cut back on the testing, which I really appreciated him doing, because we were just overrun with testing. And one of the other major problems with the testing was that it was timed. And a lot of times kids would get locked out or kicked out of the test. And thankfully I had 2 secretaries and the computer lab teacher that we could run around the building and get these kids logged back on. Because they were in a panic because, hey, I'm losing 5, 10, 15 minutes on this test that I'm timed for. And they would be panicked or crying. And of course I get to do some counseling then. Got to encourage them. Because they were just in distress. And it's a lot of pressure on these poor kids. And this No Child Left Behind thing is really, they really need to, throw it out and get rid of it. Because it's counterproductive. We nicknamed it as the teachers and educators, no teacher left alive. That's what we call it. We were losing teachers. The young teachers, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and they were gone. Because what they had learned about teaching collaboratively or creative approaches, or they were not able to do those because they were teaching to the confounded test. So, you know, right now that's a major problem in education. I've been out 3 years. I retired 3 years ago. I'm a substitute teacher. But, you know, that, the government, we had people in the government that had never taught or been in a classroom telling us what to do. And that really fired up us educators. We didn't appreciate that because they were taking away the gifts that we were given and teaching and loving kids and, you know, teaching them through, you know, creative, hands-on, collaborative.
So they took out the color and made it black and white.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it's a tragedy. It really is. And I know the homeschooling movement has grown because of that, because people kind of get fed up and they pull their kids out, you know, and they homeschool them, which is tragic because, you know, I loved my job. I loved the public schools. I believe in the public schools. You know, we are blessed in this country to have that privilege, that everybody has that opportunity to get an education, but, you know, too much government involvement. Yeah.
Another quick question. So, do teachers, you know, have to make their lesson plans? Did you have to tell them, hey, this is a day that we're like actually doing tests, so this is test week, so you better teach what's. So you have to do a lot of that?
Oh yeah, that was all put into the lesson plans. So, you know, and somebody figured up how many hours we were testing. It was some crazy astronomical amount of time. You know, it's really, it's sad what has happened to our schools.
Guys, we only have 2 minutes before our next speakers. Do you have a burning question? We've heard about problems with reading. We've heard about problems, and I mean, to say lack of parental involvement is an understatement. Serious traumas in the home that are affecting education. Teaching to the test, I think we all could have guessed that one, and the No Child Left Behind. But does anybody have a last question?
I do.
Before we have to go ahead, Rita.
Okay, so I'm planning, like, what I want to do is be a counselor also, but just by hearing, because I did do the shadowing at Rosenautic for that guidance counselor, and I think it's different from high school to elementary or grade school, but just by, it just involves testing all the time, and now that I'm actually, you know, seeing it and hearing it, it makes me feel like I don't want to get into that program now.
You know, and I'm so sorry for you to be discouraged in that way because, I mean, my desire to be an educator is because I love children. I still do, and that's why I'm a sub. I actually get to teach now that I'm a sub, you know. But, you know, I wouldn't be discouraged because I do believe that change will come. The pendulum will swing the other way. So I'm sorry that you had that experience, but I would encourage you, if you love kids, you love helping people, I wouldn't discourage you from pursuing your counseling degree, because I do think that the pendulum will swing the other way. Sometimes it's slow and it's a tedious process going, you know, from this extreme to, you know, to something else, but I can understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Nice to meet you too. I enjoyed it, guys. Thank you for being such a great audience. I enjoyed all of you guys. I wish you the best in your future educational endeavors. It's worth it. All the blood, sweat, and tears. It's worth it all.
Thank you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving to you guys.
Okay, who brought the shot? Okay, Cody and Kylie. You guys want to open with anything, or? Okay, I'm sure Krishana can handle it.
So good morning, everybody. My name is Krishana Woody. I am a licensed substance abuse associate. I also have my Bachelor of Social Work degree, and I'm currently pursuing master's in social work at New Mexico Highlands University. Accompanying me today is our master level intern from Highlands. He's doing his practicum with us. So he has to do those, and we took a field trip today to get out of the office, because that's always nice. So I believe Ms. Kyrie just said that her follow-up was about the social problems class, right? Is about alcoholism and how our agency, I work for Overcomers Counseling, and we have been in service for 14 years, going on 15. Currently at our agency, we have 3 clinicians, and we have 1 case manager, and we have a desk associate. And in our time there, we have interns come in, so we train interns at bachelor and senior, or bachelor and master level. We also take associate level San Juan College students. How we kind of combat alcoholism, it's about substance use in general. So we're a substance abuse mental health agency. We do have 1 more clinician, and her name, she's a mental health therapist in LPCC, and her name is Barbara. We have myself, and we have another social worker who also has this LSAA. And LSAA is it's a license before getting your LADAC. And a LADAC is Licensed Alcohol Drug Abuse Counselor, so that's an independent license. You guys will all figure that out whenever you get, past your associate level. But what we do is we facilitate group sessions on a daily basis. We have evening groups, we have 3-day groups, and we might be starting a 4th group because we have so many, our groups are filled, like there are 25 plus. And so we do substance abuse counseling, we do mental health counseling. Our group sessions are anger management. We are in the process of starting a domestic violence program, hopefully sometime soon. We do psychotherapy. We have a men's group. We have a women's group. So those are kind of our areas of practice. Substance use or alcoholism falls under the umbrella of substance use. And what that does is sometimes we work from a 12-step model, and what that is, it's an intervention that we use. So I don't know if you guys have heard of the 12 steps of AA or NA or any 12-step model like that. We do CBT, which is another intervention. It's cognitive behavioral. It's basically restructuring your thoughts. We do somatic experiencing and organic intelligence information. Okay, and what that is, we also do a lot of trauma work. So most likely under the umbrella of substance use also there's a piece that it can't go untreated if we have trauma with that. So we have a lot of stuff that we do. Basically, we deal with court-mandated clients. So oftentimes people come in before trial. Some people come in on probation. Some people come in just because they need help. We have voluntary clients, involuntary clients, and referrals from other agencies or whatever that looks like. I've said a lot. You guys have questions on what that means? We use a lot of acronyms whenever you get out to the field, so it's easier just to say all the stuff up there. So I guess how we combat alcoholism is, first, it's obviously a problem because people who drink often drive, or they get in some sort of legal issue, legal problem, and then they go to court. They go through the judicial system, and so most of the time, if it's not required by the court system, if they've already gone through like court, pre-trial, been sentenced, and then whether or not they do, that with the court system, then we see them after they've been sentenced. And then from there, we start the process. So when a client comes in, they're usually like, for example, I got a DWI, and I need to start probation officer says that. Okay, so we, get them on the schedule, we fill out intake paperwork, and then we go and we do an assessment. And an assessment is basically a 2-hour interview. It's basically like me asking you questions, and these questions range from various topics. Usually starts out with demographics, so it's like where you live, how old are you, what's your birthday, social security number. Then we go into medical, employment, education, drug and alcohol, amount, build a timeline to see the depth and severity of their alcohol use or drug abuse. From there, it goes to legal problems, family, social problems, and then psychiatric or mental health care that needs to be provided. After we get done with the assessment, it takes about a 2-hour process, then we go and staff with our clinical supervisor. His name is Pat Velarde, and he is the director and the owner of Overcovers Counseling. His name is Pat Velarde, and he is a LADAC, so he has his independent license. And from there, after we get done, after we gather the information, we condense it into the most important information. And then from that comes the treatment plan. So from the treatment plan come recommendations. So depending on the severity of their need, of the client's need, whether it be mental health or substance use, like do they have good coping skills. So then we just kind of see, through experience what each client needs. Then we write it out on a treatment plan. So-and-so will complete, this many sessions, and in the time that these are his main objectives. And so if you need to learn about coping skills or social skills or how to obtain employment, talk about various, gaining insight into drugs and alcohol, like what does that look like? And most of the time it's more like clients who come in, oftentimes people who drink and drug, it's usually because there's an underlying issue. And whether that be trauma, whether that be, people drink and drug, why? Why do you think people drink and drug?
Price?
It could be, depression,
Way to cope.
a way to cope. Yeah, and that's basically it. It's a coping mechanism. So they don't know how to deal with life on life's terms. However we look like stress, people drink over stress, they drink over just various reasons, trauma, whether it be like child abuse trauma or family trauma, just a whole bunch of stuff, job losses. So because they don't know how to deal with that and those emotions that come with it, it just becomes too overwhelming, and then they drink and drug because it's an easy, fast, immediate gratification. You don't feel no more, or you don't have to think no more. The most important things get put on the back burner so you can just be in the moment and just feel pleasure. Basically, that's it. If you've ever drink or drug before, it causes that immediate pleasure. You don't take your mind away from things. So it's kind of what that looks like.
I have a quick question. So what is your success rate using with your program?
Well, for our success rates, it's kind of hard because we don't do an actual follow-up. Like we have good success rate when it comes to somebody abstaining and not drinking and drugging. Like throughout, we have multiple graduations. Like from point A, you're gonna do this, complete this many sessions. We have a lot of people who don't drink and drug, and then they do like a 52 sessions. People don't drink and drug for that amount of time, and that's good. It can be anywhere from 12, 24, 36, 52 to 110 sessions if they need that level of care, depending on how much during assessment that we see a need for that. But as far as when they leave, we don't really keep in contact with them because clients who come usually, and it's sad to say because and I'm just throwing this statistic out there, but at least 50% of our clients relapse during the counseling process. Maybe 40% don't drink and drug during the time that they're with us, and then that extra 10% don't drink and drug, and then they come back for counseling afterwards when they're not mandated to come here, when the legal system isn't behind their back. Because people don't change unless there's usually fruit to the fire. And a simple example is, I don't know, you guys don't have to raise your fire burn before you have to start. You don't have to raise your hand.
I'm not with
Yeah, but it's the same thing. People don't put things in gear until they have to change. And oftentimes that fire is the legal system. So when we try to treat people and try to get them, but that's a habit, right? You guys are so used to, and I'm the same way. I'm a college student too, and I wait till I have paper due tonight at midnight. What time do you think I started on it? 5 this morning, right? I have to work, and then I have to go to class, and then I have 3 hours, right? I've already planned it out. But that's the way that, you know, people function. And in counseling, we meet them where they're at, and we help them function better. Like, what would that look like if you were to start on it yesterday, Krishana? Like, right? What would that look like if you got it done and you didn't have any stress, and you don't have to stay up till midnight? And I'm like, I don't know, because I've never done that. But, you know, we could draw it out, and we use like I'll stand up here and we have a whiteboard, not a big one like this. That'd be nice. But we have a whiteboard that we break it down, and we show them how to think. We show them why they think the way they think. And as counselors, we come from a non-judgmental place. Like myself, I'm in recovery, so I understand what that looks like and why they do the things that we do. Go ahead.
It was in one, I don't know if it's in another class I was reading about, but it says that, you know, about court mandated treatment, that majority of people who are mandated to go through treatment really don't have an alcohol problem. It was just like, you know, they went out too much and had a drink and got a DUI. So therefore, like, you know, that's where like drug court and all that stem for. And they say that majority of the ones who actually have a problem seem to never really get the help. Would you feel that's true?
No, because if they're sitting in front of me, there's some sort of functionality, and there's a coping mechanism, because it's off up here and it's off. There's new research out there that shows we feel more with the body than we do with our mind. Our mind or our bodies will tell us the truth versus our mind. That's a whole nother discussion, and I'm really passionate about that. But what is out there is, if someone is sitting in front of me and they are saying, I got a DUI, or I have a battery charge on a household member, there's something in there that says, okay, first of all, if you're drinking and that happens, there's a problem. There's a problem in functionality. But then there's also those, I understand that there's people out there that drink too much and get behind the wheel and only have 1 or 2. But depending on the size and how big they are, and from their biological and how they process alcohol affects everybody differently. So I wouldn't, but hold on 1 second, I'll be right with you. But going back to that, like, I wouldn't say that's true, because oftentimes, if that person's sitting in front of me and they're like, oh, I did this, but it's not a big issue, and it's not this or that or the other, it's, you know, and they're explaining themselves, I'm like, trying to cover something up here that's bigger than, you know, what's actually the issue. Because people can drink or drug, I understand, maybe if you're 21, you know, but you can kind of tell, drug and alcohol, court-mandated compliance, there's a level of manipulation. There's a level of just being able to understand the person and where they're from. And I say this with all respect, we all have a BS meter in here at some point in time. So if I have an inclination that someone's BSing me, you know, I've heard some really good excuses over my first couple years in the field. Or let me go back over here real quick. Yeah.
So, back to what you said, to the alcohol and stuff like that. So you said there's a reason why they're drinking.
Yeah.
Have you ever had maybe a client that came in and just said, okay, this is you find the reason, and then, you know, they leave, they come back and have a different reason why they're drinking.
Yeah, so like people will say, you know, I started drinking because my dad passed away when I was younger, and I started drinking because I didn't know how to deal with grief. Okay, so we helped them stay sober, but then there was a level of choice to that individual depending on where they're at on that spectrum of, you know, alcoholism is a disease. A lot of people think that it's a moral thing. I don't really believe that. But when it comes to the disease of alcoholism, if there's some sort of craving or some sort of progression, and it's on because in substance abuse counseling, we say mild, moderate, or severe. So if it's in the moderate or the severe type of place, there's usually multiple issues. And whether or not if they come back, it's because they didn't really address the underlying issue or the other causes and conditions of that. There could be other stuff, like a bunch, like we all have work to do. And I would tell you guys to go to counseling and therapy for that before you even get out into the field. Because there's a lot of stuff that can be triggered by other clients sitting across from you, because you can have the same kind of stuff going on. Maybe stuff that you don't know that you thought you dealt with, but if you're sitting across from somebody and they say something and you have an emotional reaction to that, it's probably something, even the smallest thing, you know, your anger, any kind of anything, you know. Okay, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, what do you feel like would be more successful for an alcoholic, inpatient treatment or outpatient?
That kind of comes on an individual basis, but if we're talking about an alcoholic, severe, and there's wide spectrum, because obviously some people come in with the idea that alcoholics are people laying on the street. Alcoholics are, you know, people who beg for money, and that's valid, maybe, you know, they're on that spectrum on the end. But then there's also functional alcoholics. There's people that I knew when I went to school who were drinking out here in the parking lot. I don't have a problem going to school and doing my job, you know. But it just depends on what, I can't really say. It just depends on the person. If they come in and I have 3 DUIs, okay, you know, maybe we're leaning already towards residential. Then we look at the past, like what's worked for them in the past. Have they gone to residential before? And if so, did that work? Because people can go to residential oftentimes. It's just a matter of time before they get caught up in a serious charge, and then they go to jail long term, or they need a longer term facility.
But Rishana, would it be fair to say that even those who go into residential treatment, it's only for a fixed amount of time?
Mhm.
Wouldn't it be fair to say that once they're released from there, they need to continue
Oh,
with
yeah.
outpatient
That is
counseling?
actually, I've never seen anybody be released from residential treatment, and that's inpatient, so they go there, they stay there for whatever amount of time. So, I've never seen anybody say, all right, you're done, here's your certificate, bye. You don't gotta do any follow-up, right? That's never the case. Everybody needs follow-up care. You know, it's good, you know, I have a client who she just popped into my mind. She's been with us since April. She did residential. She's been doing 110 sessions. That's level 2 outpatient. So she's right in the middle of it, you know. And it's good because for an alcoholic of her, and I can say that because I'm an alcoholic, that's what she says, she has a longer term care because of addressing all the underlying stuff, all the stuff that's underneath all that. There's a lot of trauma associated with some of that stuff. But it's different, you know. Depending on the severity of alcoholism, determine that assessment, then that will kind of give us a clue on what the client needs. Outpatient, how long is outpatient? Do they need to go immediately to residential? And even if we deem somebody at assessment, you need to go to residential like today, like yesterday. We have so short residential treatment centers in our area that we have to like have them in there for treatment for like 2-3 months before they can even get a bed date to a residential facility. Because I don't know if you guys know, 28 days, that's court mandated, you have to be sent there by a judge. You have to have legal pending problems. But then the other residential treatment center in our area is Four Winds. But then how many other counseling agencies just like ours are trying to send their people there? And from that, they take federal clients from the prison system and they do a 90-day and then a 90-day treatment inpatient program there. And then how many of those step down into the 30-day residential? So you have different needs, and we're really in need of counselors. We're really in need of social workers, therapists, you know, different type of modalities, specialties to help these clients because, you know, in addition to drug and alcohol, you know, you have trauma, and then you also, from the clients who have a higher level of, that, you know, they're in the prison systems, there's a level of criminal thinking that develops. Just is how they survive, you know? And so and I just say, you know, I have to be very compassionate to people who sit across from me, because first things first, third person. And a lot of people can like, oh man, you know, the client this. I've seen a lot of that. And they're human being first. And one of the biggest things that I've learned probably this year is this is a person, this is a human being sitting in front of me. They are worthy of help, you know, and I cannot get mad at them for doing things how they've always done them their entire life to keep them alive, to serve them. For whatever reason, they're doing the things, they're doing these patterns. And in counseling, we address those maladaptive patterns, those maladaptive behaviors. Instead of drinking and drugging, what about if you get angry, you take a walk? And I know that sounds very basic, or just showing them how they think and how it's maladaptive and pointing it out so they visually see it. And they become accountable, and then you take a group process, and there's 10 or 15 people who think the same way, and then they can say this worked, this didn't work. The group process is a very powerful thing. You get very different lenses, you know, because the point of counseling is you look at everything like this. You've never been called out. You don't know what's right. You don't know what's wrong. But the more work you do, it gets bigger. The picture gets bigger. You become accountable. You become responsible. You know what time management is. And then you get to make that choice, you know, and being able to support anybody in making a choice for themselves to help better their lives or any lives of others. As many of you guys probably know, alcoholism is a family disease. So it's probably something within the family, or it's perpetuated by the family and their patterns. So it's just trying to teach that person how to think, to go back into the system that which they came.
I couldn't be more proud. Krishana is a graduate of mine from the Human Services degree program, and just the Human Services program is killing it. We have the highest return on investment, and it's because of everything that Krishana, like, we don't have enough social workers. We don't have enough therapists, enough LADACs, enough residential, we don't have enough of any of those, and there is job security in that, and that's why the Human Services is such a popular career field right now, because it's very sad to say it's job security. It's kind of like being in probation and being in corrections, being in law enforcement. There's job security there because crime's not going away. Well, substance abuse is not going away. I wish you could be here all day. We have another speaker, and
Okay.
Thank you so much, Krishana. Come on up, Janice. Another graduate of mine from the Human Services. I'm just going to keep saying that. It's so exciting for me to see my students who have graduated and who are now employed. When Krishana was doing her 150-hour practicum for the Human Services degree program, she didn't even have an LSAA yet. Obviously, she hadn't graduated, and they hired her out of her practicum. Well, Janice is here, and she was a criminal justice major, and she did her practicum at Desert View Counseling Service, wanting to work with at-risk youth, and they hired her right out of her practicum. So I'm excited for you to be here.
Thank you.
Share with us what you're doing over at Desert View.
Well, I have a feeling you guys have gotten a lot of information, so I brought you guys cheat sheets.
Very nice.
And this is just for my program, so I'll start off letting you guys give you guys kind of an overview of what Desert View does as a whole. We're a nonprofit mental health facility. We have 8 therapists employed. On top of that, we have 5 bachelor level service learners, and then me, and then all of our admin staff. We have a couple different programs. We work really closely with CYFD, and that's through our family support program. Our family support workers, they are in the field, so they actually go into the homes and they work with those clients who are at risk of having their children taken away, and try to teach them, family skills, parenting skills, coping mechanisms, life skills. And then my program works directly with the schools, and works with juvenile probation in the district attorney's office. And it's a diversion program that is meant to kind of find those at-risk students who have truancy issues and teach them the life skills that they need so that they don't end up in the juvenile system. So how many of you guys know that a student who doesn't go to school can put their parent in jail? Other than these two. So it is a parent issue. You know, if your child doesn't go to school, if they miss those 10 days or those 15 parent verified days, a parent can be prosecuted. However, 99% of the time, those issues are with the children, not with the parents. So we really worked really in depth with those students to figure out what's going on, figure out why they're not going to school, and then help them learn those coping mechanisms and the skills that they need to be in an educational system. So I start off with an intake. It's a group of 7, and I bring those students in with their parents. We go over what the program consists of, and then after the intake, I meet with each family individually. And at that point in time, we talk about some of the issues that the parents are seeing with their children, and then some of the concerns that the children have with the educational system. When I went into this field, I really thought it was going to be a lot of naughty kids who just didn't want to be in school, and I was so wrong. A lot of times, those kiddos have things that are going on at home that they're not sharing with school staff. They're just rebelling. They're just not going to school. They're failing their classes. I have students who are living in cars. I have students who are being molested at home. They're being abused at home. They don't have clothes. They don't have alarm clocks. Their family doesn't have a mode of transportation. All of these issues really go into factoring why a student is not in school and why they're not meeting those grade standards. It's very difficult to pay attention in class when you're wondering where your next meal is going to come from. So I work with those students. We work anywhere from 60 days to about 6 months, and we dive into each one of those issues. Okay, so I have students who just don't get up for school on time, and they miss the bus, and then parents don't have a mode of transportation to get them there. So we work on that. Okay, what can we do? Okay, if we buy you an alarm clock, is that going to help? So we really figure out what's going on and try and help those families.
These kids that just don't care.
I do have kids that just don't care. And we're going to find that, especially with the junior high and the high school kids, because their parents have let them go for so long, calling the shots, that when you've hit high school, it's kind of hard to change that behavior.
How early do you see it happening?
Oh my goodness. So my youngest kiddo is in the 1st grade.
Whoa.
Yeah. So I deal with kiddos from 1st grade to 12th grade. And you would be shocked by some of the issues that I see, even in those elementary kiddos. I'm trying to figure out how to put this eloquently.
No need for eloquence.
Parents disciplining their children would go a long way in this field. I see kiddos as young as 6 or 7 who are calling the shots at home. They're telling their parents no. I have literally gone to houses and dragged kids out into my car and buckled them into my truck and taken them to school because they are kicking, they are fighting, they are screaming the whole way.
Remind me to call again when Christmas.
And I have done this with law enforcement, so I'm not breaking any laws here. I work pretty closely with law enforcement too. I have schools who call me and they say, okay, my kiddo has missed 12 days of school. We need to figure out what's going on. And I'm talking 12 consecutive days of school. So I'll call law enforcement and they'll say, okay, we need to go to this house. They'll come with me. We'll go do a house visit. We'll talk to the parent, and it always ends up with me taking the kid. Yes.
So have you ever, when you do these house visits and you're doing it in front of the parents, does it always have to be in front of the parents?
Not always.
So So how do you determine when the parents need to leave? Like, cause like you were saying, there's like not you, the other person is saying, there's a lot of manipulators. So I feel like parents could be like pretending that everything's safe at home and give you like, oh, it is all our kid. Like, look at that, like, you know, cause I've seen that happen.
So I do that on a case-by-case status. All of my kids get individuals where I meet with them without anybody, without teachers, without school staff, without their parents, and that's done within the school. So I have a release of information that the parents sign at that very first intake that gives me permission to work with their child, and that incorporates everything. Like I have records to, or I have access to their school records, I have access to that child, I have access to their student behavioral notes. So if I'm going through all of these steps and I'm meeting with the child and then I go to do a home visit and I see that, you know, there's a disconnect or something is happening with parents that the child didn't quite give me clues on, then I'll pull that child aside. It's really getting a feel for each client, which is difficult because I have on my caseload right now, I've got 48, so I've got lots.
Do you have a lot of repeat offenders?
I do have repeat offenders. I would say that I have a lot of repeat offenders. So about 90% of my kiddos successfully complete the program. And what that constitutes of is they have to come to group, they have to do their individuals, they have to do a weekly grade check, they have to check in with me every single Saturday. So about 80 to 90% of those students pass the program successfully. And then about 95% of those kids who have gone through the program don't end up in the legal system. So we still have about 5% that go to the judge.
What happens if they're in your program and still in school? And they admit that they're ditching you?
Oh, I'm mean. So
She's making them shovel dog poop on the 24th.
Yep, on Saturday we're shoveling dog poop. But yeah, but I have kids who, okay, so in typical high school you have 8 class periods. So for every single class period that they miss, they earn an hour of community service. So if you miss an entire day of school and it's not parent verified and it's not doctor verified, then that's 8 hours of community service that you will need.
And you have to find it on your own.
You do. So I set up the first one that's required for the program. But if those students are continuously missing school, then they're required to complete that community service on their own. Yes, sir?
You were talking about discipline, like parents need to discipline their kids. Define like what kind of discipline are you talking about?
So I'm not talking about going in and beating your child. Although sometimes that might help. But yeah, routine and structure and then having consequences for actions would go a long way with a lot of these kids. And that's, when I come in, I do see a huge change in these kids because I'm checking up on them every single week. And I'm sitting there and going, I pull their grades out and I'm like, okay, so what do we need to do about this grade? They have to do their goal setting, and the next week I go in, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? You know? And I have consequences for them. If they don't go to school, then they get community service. If they don't bring up their grades to at least passing, then they have book reports or they have essays that they have to do. Yes?
So back to the community service. What about if they don't make their own?
They don't pass the program. So if I tag on additional community service hours and they cannot prove to me that they had done those by the end of their program, then they don't successfully complete. And then what an unsuccessful looks like is I close out their case, it gets sent back to the school with the recommendations that they be sent to juvenile probation.
On the unsuccessful, is that like a kid that doesn't want to do anything?
Could be. A kid who doesn't want to do any part of the program. And my program is voluntary. So they're not court mandated. They're not required to participate.
Or he just tells you he just doesn't care?
Yeah. Kids get to the way they don't care.
So how involved are
you know, so we just
need
heard
this
from
brochure.
the first gentleman, you weren't here yet, a teacher, school counselor for 40 years, talking about a lot of the problems in education stem from the home. And then Krishana's talking about generational substance abuse and alcoholism. So how involved must the parents of a child in your program be?
So we do, like I meet with those parents or those children on a weekly basis, I meet with those parents on a weekly basis too.
Okay.
And one of the requirements of the program is that each parent do a parenting class. So obviously I can't require them to do a whole lot because my program is not court mandated. But I let them know, you know, if your child doesn't successfully participate or complete the program, you're the one who's going to be seen in front of the judge.
And you're offering parenting skills and does review or you refer out?
No, we do it once a month, but we do have a parenting group.
Good.
We also do, like the last woman said, we do alcohol groups, we do substance abuse groups, we also do life skills groups for teens, and then we work with those sexualized youth as well. So,
What degree do you have?
I have an associate's. So,
I know Kimberly is very impressed. She only has an associate's and look what she's doing.
I'm ready prepared for questions too, though. I told her I'd have a bunch.
so yeah, I did my practicum with Desert View, I did my 150 hours. And when I completed my 150 hours, they kept me on as a part-time employee because I was still working at the district attorney's office. So I worked with this problem, or this social problem, for about 7 years. But 6 of those years I worked on the legal side. So I did the prosecution of the parents and I did, well, not me personally. I filed all of that paperwork. So I've seen it from both sides. But when I did my practicum, they kept me on as a part-time employee, and then when the new school year started, I started on as a full-time employee.
What are the steps after they meet with you and it doesn't work? What happens then for them all the way to go to court?
So the very first thing that the school will do is they will, be much
Try that black one.
Okay, so the very first thing that must happen.
Oh, here, I can go to the good one.
I want a red one.
Okay, the very first thing that must happen is the student must be enrolled. So we cannot work with any kids unless they're enrolled in the school system. Okay, so the very next thing that has to happen is they have to have 10 unexcused absences. Or 15 parent verified absences. So at this point, actually, between this point, a school can refer to me. So I take kids with absences anywhere from like 5 days to 15. After they hit the 10 unexcused absences, there has to be a 10-day letter and an intervention meeting. So this is when a parent comes into the school and meets with the school staff. There's usually some kind of like attendance contract that they'll do with the parent as an attempt to try and get that student into school. After this 10-day letter, there has to be at least 1 unexcused absence. And then they'll do 1 more intervention meeting. And then there's got to be at least 1 more unexcused absence again.
Janice, the 10 unexcused absences or 15 parent verified absences, is that in a school year
In a
or a
school
semester? Okay, in a school year.
Unless it specifically states otherwise in their handbook.
School handbook.
Yeah. So if there's at least one more unexcused absence at this point, then they will look to see if they've been referred to Desert View. If they have, then they're gonna go straight to juvenile probation. If they have not, then they're most likely gonna come back to me so that they can try that process. So if they go to juvenile probation, 95% of the time, juvenile probation mandates that they come back to see me.
So they're not getting away from you regardless?
Oh, no.
Your paperwork never ends.
I had a kid, I was walking out to come here this morning and he was in the lobby and I worked with him last school year and so I sat down and I was talking to his mom and he was like, am I coming back to see you? And I was like, it's possible. And he was like, oh, no, I'll go back to school. Yeah.
Good choice. I went to the meetings at the school up there. A lot of them miss in the first semester, like the first week.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It is crazy.
It starts pretty.
Yes, it does.
It is crazy.
So after they've done a mandated program, then if they still have, and juvenile probation kind of goes on a case by case. So sometimes they have a kid who misses one unexcused day and then they send them to court. Sometimes it'll be like 10 or 15 days and then they'll send them to court. And then this is when it gets sent to the DA's office. And then that's the legal system. And so from the time that this starts to the time that they're referred to the DA's office and they're put into the legal system, it's usually between 9 and 11 months. The actual prosecution part of it usually takes about another year. So a parent who's being sent to the legal system, from the time that their children are missing these unexcused absences, it's usually about 2 years before the judge is seeing them.
Would it be fair, Janice, to say that your mission and the mission of the Truancy Court and Desert View is to avoid this?
Absolutely.
So you're like right in the middle of everything.
Yeah, just right in the middle. Ideally, I wish that I could stop every kid at like 5 to 7 absences.
Sure. So,
How often do you have your group meeting at the juvenile settlement?
So I am part of the Truancy Task Force. It is the Juvenile Probation Office, the District Attorney's Office, myself, and then a representative from every school in the county. And we meet once a month to try and figure out, new ways that we can combat truancy, ways that we can help our students to kind of be present and be in school.
Do you see any results?
Oh yeah. And a lot of times those kids just need somebody who cares about them, that sees what they're doing. So I would say about 90% of my clients are successful.
We went to maybe almost chick's mom didn't know she was ditching. Like, so when somebody cared, she fixed it. Because her parents were Spanish.
Yeah. Do you have a question?
Oh, yeah, since you said you worked at the DA's office, have you seen any parent that was prosecuted and like, do you know like, what is their sentence? Do they actually go to jail or just get off with no probation?
If you're a first-time parent who's going through the legal system, you're probably going to get off pretty easy. Unfortunately, our jails are they're too full with people who have bigger issues. So the judge is going to try and teach them a lesson without putting them in jail. I do have one parent who is incarcerated. And that was actually, she's probably from my first or second group when I started at Desert View. And her father is now incarcerated.
And usually how long is the sentence? How long is the sentence?
6 months is the standard for a first-time offense. With with $50 fine.
And you go to court too, huh?
I do. So I have to appear in court next Thursday. Testify against 3 kids, I know.
Thanksgiving?
Yeah, well, the Thursday after.
Thursday,
The
okay.
courts don't do it, let's be honest. The courts don't do anything starting Wednesday of this week, that's where that is.
I don't do anything starting
That's
Wednesday
right.
this week.
Guys, we are out of time, again, thank you so much. Hey guys, so I read your midterms, good work, I was impressed. And I made comments, I didn't just enter grades, I did make a few comments. If you have questions or concerns about my comments or your grade, please see me so that we can talk about it. I want you to succeed on the final. If you have questions about the final, ask them so that you do well on the final project. We can talk more next week. Have a lovely Thanksgiving. Be safe if you're traveling. And we'll do this again on Monday. Ashley, when you confirm your speaker, text me or email me. That would be great.
And you already put midterm freezer?
Oh, that's right, yeah.
Into WebAdvisor? No. I graded your midterms last night.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Wow.
I
said, wow, you
It's just
should-
in an 8-week class, it's moving so fast, I don't want you wondering, I was a student, I used to check my, like, every half hour, did you grade that, did you grade now, I don't want to.
Every time I like get notifications, I'm like.
Is it, yeah, no, good job.
What do we have to
All right.
over to?
Anyway, that was kind of
I think there was some
Yes,
mind tag, maybe.
I just called
One or
my
two
teacher,
chapters.
yeah, that's
Yes,
fine.
1 or 2 chapters, I don't remember, and I don't have my computer up here.
All right.